One tip I would give to someone in isolation would be to catch up with your friends and reach out to people. I know we're all bored of FaceTime and Zoom, but it will help you feel less lonely and give you a space to express your feelings.
One tip I give to someone in isolation is to do some exercise daily. Whether you can go outside or you've got to stay inside, whether it's just running on the spot or following along with a YouTube workout. It's really good not only for your physical health but also for your mental health.
One tip I would give to someone in isolation is to limit the amount of screen time they have. So perhaps just shut down all your screens, either read a book or listen to an audiobook. I've just finished listening to one of the Jack Reacher books on audio.
One tip I would give to someone in isolation is why not start a new project, or use the time to do something that you've always wanted to do but maybe you haven't had time to do. For example, you could learn a new language. This will help to keep your brain stimulated, it will help to pass the time, and then maybe you can come out of isolation feeling like you have something to show for it.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the third of 4 of our lunchtime talks we're hosting across our events fortnight. Hope you've had a great afternoon so far, and we're so glad to see you here at Encounter. We're the Christian Union, and I'm Luke. I'm a second year aerospace engineering student, originally from London, and I'm the treasurer this year for the Christian Union.
Hi, my name's Izzy. I am originally from Basingstoke. I'm currently studying a Masters in Acting, and this year I'm the CU Small Group Coordinator. To start off, we'd just like to clarify that this is Zoom webinar rather than your usual Zoom, which you're probably used to, but this means we can't see or hear you right now. Just a quick run through of what's about to happen. In a minute, we're going to introduce Martin to you, who will be speaking to us on the topic of loneliness. How do I escape isolation?
And don't forget, Zoom webinar has a Q&A function, so if any questions pop up for you throughout the talk, don't hesitate to put them in there, and we'll do our best to get through all of them at the end of the talk. And after this call is finished, we're going to head over to another Zoom call where you can come and chat to some of the CU members or Martin if you've got any questions about the talk, and just have a bit more of a discussion over there, somewhat in person on a Zoom call. So I'll put the link for that in the chat now.
Cool. Lovely. On that note, we're going to introduce Martin to you. Hi Martin, how are you?
Hello. Yeah, doing well, thank you. Thanks very much. Yeah, doing well.
Lovely.
So we'd love to find out a little bit more about you. So could you briefly tell us who you are and what do you do?
Yeah, great stuff. So I've been saying to people, I'm from Eastbourne. I say that's where I live at the moment. I've lived all over the country. So at one stage I was a Brummie. I lived up in the West Midlands, so I had a very different accent. But yeah, lived down in Eastbourne, and I spent my time kind of traveling around different places, schools, colleges, universities, churches, anywhere really that'll have me, talking about Jesus and trying to answer people's questions by pointing them to him.
Sounds great. So without any further ado, take it away.
Great stuff. Let's what we've been doing throughout here we go, share screen. I can't multitask for toffee, as you can probably tell right now. What we've been doing is we have been really looking at encounters that Jesus has with a whole bunch of people, looking at one of the biographies of his life. So looking at Luke's biography of Jesus' life. And Robin's been doing talks on that in the evenings, and I've been doing them during the afternoons. And each time the aim is to try and say, what does Jesus have to say in answer to the big question that is being thrown out to us? Because we're convinced that Jesus is good news, and he is the answer to life's biggest questions and the deepest longings of our hearts. So thanks so much for joining us again today. We're looking at this subject of loneliness. How do I escape isolation? A big question, and no doubt has been all the more at the fore thanks to lockdown and all the COVID shenanigans and things. But how do I escape isolation in this kind of lonely world in which we live? There's a book out recently by a economist, public intellectual, whatever you want to call her. I'm sure just call her nice things, but her name is Narina Hertz, and she's written a book called The Lonely Century. And in that, she tries to give a definition of what loneliness actually is. And she really kind of draws this conclusion that loneliness is a disconnection from pretty much anything or everything. So loneliness is a disconnection from, could be from politics or from society, or even from yourself. And she talks about how you can feel disconnected even when you are in a relationship with someone, even when you're part of a family or a community. You can still have this kind of sense of loneliness because you just feel disconnected and cut off from others. So that's what we're going to kind of go with today in terms of when we're thinking about loneliness. It's a disconnection from people, from things. And Narina Hertz makes the point that we live in this society, she says, particularly over the last 40 years, which has become a dog eats dog kind of a world where it's each person for themselves. And she charts how you can kind of see this happening. So, for example, with Freddie Mercury in terms of music, Freddie Mercury in 1977 singing "We Are the Champions." There are a lot more songs about we and us. But now in the 21st century, there's a lot more songs that are all about me. So Ariana Grande's song "Thank You Next," is a love song to herself. So it's about her. And so Narina says we live in this culture where everything is all about me. Listen to the way that she puts it. The trouble is that an all about me selfish society in which people feel that they have to look after themselves because no one else will, is inevitably a lonely one. So an isolated, a lonely kind of culture is what is going to emerge when we live lives which are all about me. And if each one of us is doing that, there's going to be problems in the world in which we live. And I think that's what she would say is what we see right now. So let's think today then, in the next kind of 15 minutes, about an encounter that Jesus has with someone who was disconnected, with someone who was lonely. This guy is a guy you can read about in Luke's biography in Luke chapter 19, and I'll read the story to us in a few moments. But Zacchaeus was a guy who was very short. He was the hobbit of Israel, if you like, and he was absolutely minted. He had loads and loads of money. And so let me just read to you the start of the story about Zacchaeus, this guy who very much was living out our culture of an all about me lifestyle. This is what it says. Jesus entered Jericho, which was a city, and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was wealthy. So Zacchaeus was this guy who saw himself very much as an outsider. He has lots of money, and on the outside it all looks, hunky-dory. He's got loads of cash, he's got a nice house and everything like that. But on the inside, there's this darkness, there's this real sense in which he understands I am disconnected from the people around me. And so Zacchaeus feels as though he's always on the outside, looking in, that other people seem to be enjoying life and not having the issues that I've got. I feel lonely, I feel disconnected, but they seem to not be of that ilk. And it's very easy in our lives to feel isolated and to feel lonely, even when we're surrounded by others. Hannah Arendt, who did a lot of work really focusing on the rise of Nazism in Germany and Stalinism or Bolshevism in Russia, she was looking at a lot of the roots, and she was saying that loneliness was one of the big causes behind the popularity of those movements in those countries. She was a lady who was German and had to escape Germany in the 30s. She ended up going over to the Czech Republic, over to Switzerland, then over to France, then down to Spain, and over to Portugal, and then across to the USA to escape being killed. And so she's a lady who wanted to very much have an interest in finding out what was driving people. And as I say, she thought loneliness was this key factor. And she described lonely people as those who have no place in society. So those people who feel disconnected from everyone else and what is going on around them. And as I say, Zacchaeus was one of these guys who just had that real sense in which he was lonely, was disconnected from others. The question is why? Well, for him, it was that he was a tax collector. And tax collectors have never got a great reputation, but particularly back in those days, they were known for being very corrupt. And so I love chocolate, and so I love to think about collecting taxes in terms of collecting Kit Kats. Now, a regular tax collector would collect a Kit Kat for himself back then, and they would have a little stick for themselves, and then they would give another stick to the Roman authorities. and that's what they'd be doing with their taxes. But we're told that Zacchaeus wasn't just an ordinary tax collector, he was a chief tax collector. That means he was taking the Kit Kat chunkies off people. He was a greedy man. So he was lining his own pockets with all of this cash and all these cash prizes. But the worst thing for the Jewish people around him would be that they would see him as a traitor. They would see him equivalent to the way that many Americans see someone like Edward Snowden, a traitor to their own country, because he would take that money that he'd be given, sure, he'd line his own pockets, but he would then give the majority of it to the Roman authorities, who would use that to oppress brutally the Jewish people. So no one liked him. He had a very difficult situation. He was despised, although he was minted. He was lonely, he was disconnected. But we read on, it says he wanted to see who Jesus was. There was this intrigue with Jesus. He saw the darkness of his life, the darkness of the world around him. And yet, all of a sudden, he gets this news that Jesus is coming to Jericho, and he's in Jericho, and him and the crowds, they want to see what is going on with this Jesus. They'd heard the stories about how he'd raised the dead, fed thousands of people with hardly any food whatsoever, and how he'd been doing these miracles and doing incredible teaching and speaking in such a way that no one else did, in a way where he got people and he got God and he got what life is really about. He was massively intrigued. Could this Jesus be the one who actually provides light into my dark life? Could he be the one who actually reconnects me when I'm living in my life in this disconnected way? He was intrigued by Jesus. And there'll be that people here today who kind of really think, who are watching today going, look, there's some kind of intrigue that I have with Jesus right now. I'm not quite sure what it is, but there's something about this Jesus that I'm interested in. Maybe you've got friends in the Christian Union and they always bang on about Jesus, and you know that Jesus is the one who gets them out of bed in the morning as well as their alarm clock. He's the one who drives them. And you're like, I'm interested in this Jesus. What is the deal with him? What is he all about? Well, you're in the right place looking at the Gospels of Jesus, the biographies, because it's there that you get to see why Jesus is the answer to our loneliness and our disconnection. See, it goes on there. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was short, he could not see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. So Zacchaeus is intrigued, so he investigates, which is what you guys are doing, which is brilliant. So keep on coming along to the evenings and hearing Robin speak, and come along to the next afternoon one on Thursday as well. So we've got Wednesday night, Friday night, and Thursday afternoon. Come along to those. Zacchaeus wanted to see Jesus, so he goes at the tree because he wants to see him. You know, it says there, when Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today. So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. Now, I love it here because you get Jesus amidst this crowd, loads of people trying to get the attention of Jesus. Zacchaeus has climbed the tree, and yet Jesus comes to this particular tree where Zacchaeus is, to this lonely, disconnected guy. And he says to him, the first word is what? Zacchaeus. Jesus calls him by name. And I love that because it's what Jesus does for all of us. He is not just another regular bloke. He was a human being for sure, and he is a human being. But what is the great thing about Jesus is that he's actually God in the flesh. He's the Son of God. He's God the Son. And he's come into this world and he knows all about us. And he'd come to this situation in Zacchaeus' life to call Zacchaeus to come and be reconnected to him and reconnected to the God of this universe. And he calls him by name and he knows all about him. Jesus, knows his name. He knows what he's done. And he doesn't say, you stay up in the tree, I'm just going to ignore you. No, he says, actually, I want you to come down and come and feast with me. I want you to have me round to your house so that we can actually connect. And that's what Jesus is saying to each of you today, that he's calling you by name and wants to connect with you. So there are two reasons, though, that Zacchaeus had climbed the tree or couldn't actually see Jesus. Let me just explain those briefly. The first one was that he was short. He was a couple of inches short of a height chart. He just couldn't see Jesus because of his stature. And there's another reason he couldn't see Jesus, which is added to the height problem, was actually that the crowd around him were a bit taller and they were blocking his view. He couldn't actually see Jesus because of the crowd. But it wasn't just that the crowd were that bit taller. The crowd also didn't like Zacchaeus, as I've said. Listen to verse 7. It says, all the people saw how Jesus had welcomed Zacchaeus and began to mutter, he's gone to be the guest of a sinner. They all have a big downer on Zacchaeus. They call him a sinner. And a sinner, if you want to know what a sinner is, I think one of the best ways to know is to listen to a bit of Coldplay. And you remember they sing that song, do you ever get the feeling that you're missing the mark? And they say again, do you ever get the feeling that you're missing the mark? It's so cold, it's so cold. And I won't sing it. That's, I think, is a brilliant definition of what sin is. It's about missing the mark. And sin really is about when we've not actually hit the target of life. And what is the target of life? Well, it is this. It's to love God and to love people. It's to be connected with God and connected with people, and not to ever cause any disconnection between us and others, or us and God. And when they're calling him a sinner, they're saying he's someone who's missed the mark. He's not hit the target. He's actually someone who's not loved God and loved other people properly. He is a sinner. He is what's wrong with the world. And what's interesting is that the crowd do what we all do in life, is we tend to look at people like Zacchaeus, or people who we think are bad, and we think, I'm better than that. And I'm not a sinner. They are sinners. They're the ones who are wrong. They're the ones who haven't got life right. They're the ones who have missed the mark. They're the ones who are lost and gone down that lost path. But Jesus comes into this world to reveal to us that we're all in the same boat. We're all sinners. We've all missed the mark. Sure, sometimes we love people well, and sometimes we do great things for people and treat people in immensely kind ways, and that is brilliant. But so often we're not even aiming at the target of loving people and loving God. We're just aiming at our own target, as Narina Hertz put, of being all about me. And we're trying to hit that instead, and therefore missing the real target of life, to love God and love others. So what happens when we see this? What does all this mean for us? Well, it means this, that Jesus wants us to see the reality that we're all sinners, because he wants us to know what he says in this story in Luke 19, that the reason Jesus came into the world was because he came to seek and to save the lost. Listen, I think I just flicked through that there. It says, for the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. This is why Jesus came, because he knows that we are disconnected from one another in many ways, and disconnected from wider society in many ways. But he knows our greatest problem is our disconnection from God. And that's really at the root of why we end up with such disconnected and fragmented lives with others. And Jesus said, look, I've come into the world for Zacchaeus. And Zacchaeus must have been over the moon, because everyone else wrote him off. And yet Jesus says, no, I've come into this world for sinners like Zacchaeus. I've come into the world for people who know they're lost. That is, people who know that they haven't got life together, that they haven't got life sorted, who know that they are disconnected from God. I've come for people like that in this world, which, if we're honest, that's every single one of us. And that's good news, because Jesus has come into the world to look for you and to find you and to reconnect you back with the God of this universe. I'm pleased to say that Zacchaeus realized this. The penny dropped for him, that life is about knowing the God of this universe and being welcomed into his family. It says there in verse 6, Zacchaeus came down at once and welcomed Jesus gladly. And that's really what it is to be a Christian. It's someone who says, yeah, I want to know Jesus. I want Jesus to be at the center of my life. I want to be forgiven for what I've done wrong. And I want to be reconnected with the God of this universe. And Zacchaeus welcomes Jesus, which means he turns to Jesus from himself, from this all about me life, to it being all now about Jesus. He says, I don't want any longer to have this isolation of being disconnected from God. I want to be reconnected. And he gets that reconnection through Jesus. Listen to what happens as they eat a meal, just after they've eaten a meal together. It says this, but Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor. And if I've cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount. Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham. A son of Abraham is simply someone who believes God, who believes what God says. And Jesus is saying, Zacchaeus has believed what I've said. And so he really is saved. And that means he really is forgiven. And he really has been reconnected now with God, because he's welcomed Jesus. And it's fascinating in the story that Zacchaeus, this guy who's loved to hoard money and grab money and loved to do life being all about me, ends up going from this grabber to this giver. How does that happen? It says there he ends up giving away 4 times. He promises, I'll give away up to 4 times of what I've taken from people. The law's requirement for the Jews was that they gave back what they stole plus 20%. And here he is saying, look, I'm going to give back what I stole 400 plus 400%. That's an incredible change in heart look and outlook and attitude. How does he do that? What is the way that he has found, to quote the man though? What is the way? Well, it's this, that he's come to know Jesus. And what Jesus does is he always says, look, come to me as you are, but I don't want you to then stay as you are. I want then to change who you are. But Jesus says, come to me as you are, and I will change you from the inside out. Jesus says, if you welcome me into your life, I will come into your heart and into your life, and I will transform your heart, your mind, and the way that you live life. And I will change your actions by changing, firstly, your heart. Jesus doesn't come into the world and saying to Zacchaeus that before I come to lunch, you need to sort this out and this out and this out. No, he says, I'm not trying to say to you, try harder or be better, but I'm saying, come to me, welcome me, receive me, Zacchaeus, and I will change you from the inside out. And that's the promise. And that's what he offers to each one of us, that if we welcome him and have him as the center of our lives, he will transform the way that we live by simply us receiving Jesus and saying, I don't want it to be all about me anymore, but I want it to be all about you from now on in. We've had this question throughout today, loneliness. How do I escape isolation? What we see in the story is that our greatest isolation is our disconnect from God. The way we get connected again is by going to Jesus and trusting and receiving him. Let me just finish with these last few slides and this last few comments. It says in the story, when Jesus saw Zacchaeus up the tree, it says, Jesus said this, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today. How do we get this reconnection? Well, we spend all of our lives hanging around in trees, metaphorically, that is. You may do that physically as well. But we if you're a quite interesting person, but we spend our lives hanging around in trees, hiding away from Jesus, hiding away from the crowds, thinking if I can just stay here, I'll be okay. I can do life on my own. But actually, no, we can't do life on our own. And Jesus says to Zacchaeus that you need to come down from the tree. Why? Well, because shortly after this story, Jesus was about to go up a tree himself and be hanged to death being hanged on a wooden cross and being nailed to that cross and being brutally crucified on a cross for you and me. He says to Zacchaeus, come down from the tree because I must go up to the tree. And that's where I will pay for all those ways that you've missed the mark in life. And that's what Jesus is offering each one of us, because he doesn't want us to remain disconnected in this life from God, nor connected in the life to come from God, which the Bible says will happen if we reject him. We'll be cut off from God forever, which would be horrific because he's the God of light and life and joy. And so my urging to you today is to say, look, if you're recognizing that disconnection, and even if you're not, see it and come to Jesus and find that he is the one who's removed your sin so that you can be reconnected with the God who is there and who dearly and deeply loves you. Thanks ever so much.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that, Martin. The topic of loneliness at the moment is super relevant and something that we have all had experience with in different contexts. So thank you so much for talking to us about that. And we hope it's given you some comfort, or maybe it's left you with even more questions, which is absolutely fine as well. Speaking of questions, we've now an opportunity to answer some of those. So please use the Q&A function on Zoom webinar to send them in, and we will try to get through as many as possible. We do have one. So Martin, there has been a lot of research to suggest that our recent generations, the loneliest that have ever been. Why do you think this is, and how can Jesus help us in this?
Yeah, well, I think, I mean, the Narina Hertz book is helpful at looking at a lot of recent factors. You know, she looks at the last 40 years. She puts it down to neoliberalism, which was my instant thought as well of why we all feel lonely. But no, what actually means that we've got this kind of society now, which is all about the freedom of the individual and the focus and the pursuit of of you living for yourself. And so I think she has diagnosed, really the heart of the problem of loneliness and disconnection from others, that we do live for ourselves. So I think that's a good point. What she doesn't go on to say is actually the root cause of that is actual disconnection from the God of this universe. So I think there are different factors like that. And the book I mentioned recently in last week was by a lady called Jean Twenge, called iGen, and she looks at a lot of the way that just phones and just the constant battering of the internet has basically caused a lot of disconnection as well for people. So there's lots of good stuff out there from people who are looking at a lot of the problems of disconnection. But I think the real solution to that, and how Jesus can help us, is through what I was saying earlier, is that Jesus has come into the world knowing that we are disconnected, and the reason he's come is to reconnect us. So on the cross, when Jesus died, it's like he's grabbing the hand of his Father, God the Father, and he's grabbing our hand, and he's with his arms outstretched, he's bringing the two back together so that we can be reconnected. And because that is the root of our problem, our disconnection from God, that's going to be the key. Jesus is going to be the key and the only solution then to that disconnection. And so he would say, yeah, he is that answer. And I think, as I know from my experience and also from other people's experiences, you look around, that when you come to know Jesus, he does then enable you to see your problems and your faults and where you've got things wrong. And his aim is then to transform us so that we then go, oh, that's not a great way to live. Actually, I want to live now the way of Jesus. And that way is a way of connecting with others on that horizontal level as well. So yeah, Jesus would say he's that solution to our ultimate disconnection.
Thank you.
We've got another one. So they said, so basically the story of Zacchaeus has parallels with Scrooge in A Christmas Carol.
You know A Christmas Carol, Martin?
I know it through a Muppets Christmas Carol with Bonsai. Yeah. So I know of it. Yeah. So the question is, does it have parallels of it? Or is it just an observation?
Yeah, more of observation. Yeah.
Yeah, I like the observation. Yeah, and he needs his heart changed, doesn't he? But the heart of Scrooge is really the heart of us all. But most of us are just pretty good at covering that up and making it look that actually we're really nice people. But actually, the heart of Scrooge is Jesus says is actually what all of our hearts are like. So we just don't like showing that. And Jesus, comes as this light to expose the darkness of our hearts, not because he wants to make us feel doomed and like, oh no, that's game over now. It's because he wants us to see the problem so that we'll go to him as the solution, because he knows that what would be best for us is if we get a new heart from him. And he can change the external by changing the internal, by actually sorting our heart first. So yeah, I like the parallel. Thanks for whoever did that.
Yeah, I think that's great. It's another one for you. So at the moment, if you hadn't heard, there's a pandemic on, and lockdown makes socializing. Yeah, I know. Who knew? Lockdown makes socializing really, really difficult. So do you have any practical COVID-friendly tips? Anybody who is feeling particularly isolated right now?
Yeah, well, I think that a lot of the tips that came on the video earlier were really good. It's about that kind of trying to stay in touch with people as much as possible. I think that it could involve actually making a phone call without actually seeing the face. That can often actually be quite relaxing for other people and for yourself. I think even doing really old school things like writing a letter is no one gets letters anymore. No one gets handwriting through the post anymore. So writing something like that to people to connect with people, I think we've done that quite a bit. Our kids have done it quite a bit, and people have loved it. Just receiving that, and we've also been the recipients as well. In fact, Narina Hertz in a book, not to bang on about that too much, but she talks about that as how we need both that kind of the giving and receiving for real community to take place. That it needs to be not just one person instigating it and everyone else just receiving, and us being vacuum cleaners sucking the life out of everything, but how it needs to be a dual thing happening. So I think the more that we love people and are kind to people and engage people like that, you see that happening as well. They'll pass that on to other people as well. So yeah, write to people, phone people, exercise, all those kind of things. But I think ultimately as well, the way to deal with it, I found, is that Jesus has been an incredible rock for me in these times when it's so frustrating and so painful and so annoying at different times, that he's just been a rock in the sense of, again, showing me my faults, but also then showing me there's real forgiveness in him, and then helping me to go, let me be more gracious and more forgiving towards other people. And that's the kind of thing that he does. I would not be able to do that in and of myself, but he gives you that kind of help to help you to love people. So yeah, I think the final kind of comment I'd make is, use this time. Look, it's weird, and hopefully it won't happen loads again in the future, but use this time when you've actually got loads of time to look at Jesus for yourself, and go on the CU's kind of website and find the Uncover Luke's Gospel and read it and find out about Jesus. Because if this stuff is true, then it changes everything for you. And I'm absolutely convinced Jesus is true, and what he says is brilliant news for you.
No, definitely. So we've got another question. So it says, does that mean that Christians don't get lonely?
No, so Christians can get lonely, and I think it depends on what level we're talking about it, because we can have, if we're talking about it in terms of disconnection from others, I think Christians can have that when we sin, when we don't love people and love God as we should, we can actually cause that disconnection sometimes with others, but then also other people can cause that with us by sinning against us as well. So as Christians are still human beings, even though we might not look like it, as we're all still human beings, we can all experience loneliness still. But I think what you get again in Jesus is the God who, at Christmas we're told he is Emmanuel, God with us. There's this incredible person who's now living with you. And so I think at times when I feel isolated and cut off, I need to go to him and go, hang on, I've been neglecting you, I've been turning away from you, I've been ignoring you. And the more I spend time with him, the more that, if you like, that loneliness or that disconnection evaporates. So the solution is to go to Jesus, and Christians will feel isolated at different points, and we will feel isolated, during lockdowns. Physical isolation is a reality for, I'm sure, for us all, and that's difficult, but it's just important for us to try and kind of connect with each other as best we can, but ultimately connect with Jesus.
Yeah, absolutely. We have another question kind of on that note, exactly what you were just saying. Being a Christian help you to become connected to other people as well as God, you think?
Yes, I think absolutely. Because I think when you come to know, when you realize that you're a sinner and it's not just other people out there, that when you realize actually you're what's wrong with the world, and I'll stop blame shifting all the time, I think that is liberating, because then you go, look, the fact that Jesus loves me still is not because I'm any good, it's because he's incredibly good. And you go, if he loves me like that, then he loves, and what I see in the Bible is that he loves every single person in this world, that he bled and died for them. So he loves everyone out there, and that means everyone who's listening right now. And because he's like that, you go, cool, wow, that means you can actually love people genuinely and care for people no matter who they are, no matter where they come from, because you know Jesus loves them. And so yeah, it does help you to connect, and it helps you to, I guess, forgive and interact and be kind to people too.
Bit of a big one this time. We've got what are practical ways as a Christian that we can feel connected to God when some of our sins seem so great sometimes? It'd be great if you could give some specific points, although reading the Bible and listening to Christian songs is obviously helpful. Many thanks. It was a great talk.
Oh, thank you. And yeah, I think, reading the Bible and Christian songs are great, as you say, because they sing truth into your heart and head in ways that just talking often doesn't. And that's why we've got a whole book of Psalms in the Bible that does that, because it was Jesus' songbook. He needed the songs, we need them too. So they're really good. I think when you feel kind of the weight of your sin, it is using, like, for example, the Psalms just talk about just crying out to God. And whenever you are massively burdened, you just got to run to Jesus in prayer. And when you feel like your back's against the wall and your sin's ever before you, then Psalm 51 is your go-to place, because it's a psalm where David, the king, who's basically had committed a bit of dodgy nookie with another man's wife and then killed her husband. He's done an almighty kind of blunders. You get this guy there going, what an idiot I've been. But he goes to the Lord, he goes to Jesus, and he realizes that in Jesus there is forgiveness. And so it's hearing the gospel, it's hearing the good news of Jesus again and again. I think that just kind of makes you go, yeah, I see there is forgiveness in him, and that when Jesus bled and died, he bled and died for every sin of every single one of us, not just some sins. But the saddest thing is when as Christians we don't go to Jesus when he says, no, I have really genuinely paid for that. And the saddest thing for those who aren't Christians is when you don't receive that forgiveness, because it's there ready as a gift for you to be received. So I'd say it's just, you've got to go to Jesus. We looked at earlier in the week, last week, sorry, about Jesus saying, come to me, all you who are burdened and heavy laden, I will give you rest. And he's saying that come to me, my burden is light and my yoke is easy. So it's about going to Jesus and crying your heart out if you're particularly feeling like, no, he doesn't love me. It's okay to cry on those things.
Yeah, absolutely. Praise God that we can go back to him time and time again.
Yeah.
We have time for just one more question, if that's all right, Martin?
Yeah, please do. Yeah, go for it.
Cool. So if humans are meant for connection, how come so many of us are feeling lonely at the moment? Especially because we're in something that's outside of our control, i.e. pandemic. So why do you think people are still feeling so lonely if we're meant for connection?
Yeah, well, one of the things, again, we looked at earlier in the week, there's a quote from an historian, Elizabeth Lash Quinn, and she was talking about, similar to Narina Hertz, about we live in this era of the self, where we've been told through our education and through not just our education, but through the whole kind of the whole media and through basically the whole shebang, everything and everyone, constantly, that everything is about you and what you feel, your feelings determine reality. And that's the mentality that we all, including myself, just naturally have because of the world we live in. And so I think we then naturally feel, I've just got to take care of me and look at me. And that's why we feel disconnected, because I'm doing that, you're doing that, and we're all so self-consumed that we just feel so disconnected. And so the way out of ourselves is to look out from ourselves to Jesus, and that's, he is the only solution to that. You know, we can try, and it's good to try to change ourselves, but we can't ultimately change ourselves properly. We can be informed and reformed by the various things, but the only one who can properly transform you and give you a new heart and an outlook where you actually want to connect in a loving way with people is Jesus. So yeah, why would you feel so disconnected? That's what sin is. Adam and Eve, the first humans, walked away from God. They disconnected. We've all done the same, and we share in that as well. We've all done the same ever since. So the only way back to that real sense of connection is to go to the one who actually brings us together, and that's Jesus when he died and rose again.
Cool. Amazing. On the theme of Jesus there for all of our answers.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah,
nice and
he cropped
simple.
up a few times, didn't he?
Yeah.
Funny that.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Martin. We don't have any more time for questions, but remember there is a Zoom in a moment. Chat to some CU members, or to Martin if you do have any further questions or you want to discuss anything. I'll just post the link to that again on the chat. It makes you feel more comfortable. You can come to that Zoom anonymously. You can change your name and your video off, etc. Alternatively, feel free to be as open as you like and share your story with us, whatever would you most at ease.
Great. And we also wanted to mention a few of the other things we've got going on this week. So similar to last week, we've got evening talks happening on Wednesday and Friday at 6 p.m. And on Thursday, we have our fourth lunchtime talk at 2 p.m. again. So do come along those to find out more. And don't forget, this Friday, we're having another pizza night. So if you missed the last one, it's not too late to come along and grab some free pizza. So the details for that will be explained on the night. So do come along to find out how you can get some pizza. As well as this, after this week, we're going to be running an experience course for 4 weeks from the 26th of February. And this is a chance to find out more about how some students at Surrey have experienced Jesus and looking into what Jesus can bring to your life, and also an opportunity to ask questions about any aspect of Christianity and Jesus that you might have. It's going to be running online, as most of our lives are currently because of the pandemic. And you can find out how to join on our website. I'll put the link for that in the chat as well. And there's also a connect form, which you should have got after you signed into this Zoom webinar, which you can fill in to let us know that you want to join that, or just connect with someone and get connected with the CU.
Cool. If you want to read more about Luke's account of Jesus's life, we have a link for an Uncover Luke. I've got one right here. Digitally as well, you'll find a link for that on our website. It's a really great resource. Dig into one of the Gospels with questions and videos to help you grapple with the text. Feel free to read it alone, or if you would like to read it with somebody in the CU, please do get in touch with us via Facebook or Instagram. We're more than happy to find somebody to read with you. Do keep following us on social media to stay up to date with everything that's going on. And we really hope to see you at the Welcome Desk Zoom, which is happening imminently. More of a face-to-face as much as it can be kind of vibe there. It'll be great to see you there.
Thanks again for everyone to come in. Hope you have a great rest of the day and hopefully see you on the Zoom call.
Bye guys, thank you.
Bye.